Good morning. It is Tuesday, December the 18th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So, Stephen Curry from the basketball team, the professional basketball team in California, the Golden State Warriors, says that the moon landing was a fake. The moon landing, what I'm talking about, is the one that happened in 1969. With Neil Armstrong, etc. He claims that this was a fake. And I'm bringing this up because this is one of the tools that the left likes to use. It's called skepticism, and it is a contradiction. It states that nothing can be known with certainty. And it's a contradiction because the statement itself is a statement of certainty. So the skepticism is behind all conspiracy theories. JFK was assassinated by the CIA. It's skepticism. And the reason people wax skeptical and try to be skeptical about things is that there's a payoff. And the payoff for being skeptical is that if nothing can be known with certainty, then anything is possible. Okay. So, again, the idea that the moon landing was faked, and Stephen Curry's not the first person to make that arbitrary allegation. And that's another thing that the conspiracy theorists like to do, is they make an arbitrary allegation such as this, that, hey, the moon landing was faked, and then wait for you to try to prove a negative and prove that it was not faked, which is impossible. The burden of proof is on the skeptic to prove that the moon landing was faked. And as long as they don't, then we get to ignore their statement. So when I come back, I'll be reading from the transcript from Rush Limbaugh from a couple of days ago. And then after that, I'm going to read from Ayn Rand's lexicon, more about what we were covering yesterday. And then a couple of books about Saul Alinsky and the rules for radicals when I come back. Thank you very much. Welcome back. And Rush Limbaugh, this clip from, it's not a clip, it's actually just a transcript from his show from a couple of days ago, December 14th, as a matter of fact, that it's called We Are Where I Warned You We Would Be. Rush. And here we are right in the EIB network. Rush Limbaugh Nation turns wary and concerned eyes to this program for answers and reassurance. And I say that because I'm getting emails from people. Quote, Rush, it all seems like it's falling apart. What can you tell us? Unquote. And Johnny Donovan. And now from sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday. Rush, what I can tell you is, and I'm going to go back and do it, that I predicted all this. And I'm not making this about me. Don't misunderstand. I know a lot of hosts who try to make it all about them. I don't have to make it all about me. It already is. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to the archives from 2 years ago. I warned everybody that we're going to be right here no matter what Donald Trump did. We are here. We've had the opportunity to get ready for this. Everybody has. So interesting that he says, I'm not going to make this about me, but then again, I'm going to make this about me, because he says it already is. And as a matter of fact, his show, like Sean Hannity's and other shows, is simply bragging. That's what they do. They brag about what they know or who they know, or the predictions that they've made that have come true. And that's what he's doing in this particular case. Now, one of the important things is about making predictions. That's become the sign of intelligence. That is a sign of intelligence. And it is foisted on us again by the left. It used to be that intelligence was determined by how much you knew and how fast you learned. The faster a person learned, the smarter they were. And now it is whether or not you make accurate predictions. anybody can make a prediction, especially if you're dealing with a 50-50 situation like Rush Limbaugh was here. Either things were going to turn out the way he said they were going to turn out, or they're not. Big deal. It's a 50-50 situation. Make a prediction that in which you have a 1 out of 10 chance of being right, then come back and brag to me about your correct prediction. Make a prediction in which you have a 1 out of 100 chance of being right. And then when it's accurate, then come back to me and say, "See, I told you so," and I'll listen to it. But 50-50, so what? That again. It doesn't take any smarts to do that in an either-or proposition. Anyone can do that. So, and what Rush Limbaugh needs to do is quit it with making predictions. Predictions are not a sign of smarts. It's about learning. He needs to read some books, particularly books on philosophy, and learn and understand what's really going on in this country and why we have the struggles that we do. And he will have a much better show if he does that. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from Ayn Rand's Lexicon. Thank you very much. The Ayn Rand Lexicon and definitions is the concept of the day, and it's rather a long piece, so I'm divided up into sections. I started it yesterday, and I'm going to be reading some more today. Thus, a definition complies with the two essential functions of a consciousness, differentiation and integration. The differentia isolates the units of a concept from all other existence. The genus indicates their connection to a wider group of existence. For instance, in the definition of table, an item of furniture consisting of a flat level surface and supports intended to support other smaller objects, the specified shape is the differentia, which distinguishes tables from the other entities belonging to the same genus, furniture. In the definition of man, a rational animal, rational is the differentia, animal is the genus. A definition must identify the nature of the units, i.e. the essential characteristics without which the units would not be the kind of existence they are. It is the principle of unit economy that necessitates the definition of concepts in terms of essential characteristics. If, when in doubt, a man recalls a concept's definition, the essential characteristics will give him an instantaneous grasp of the concept's meaning, i.e. of the nature of its reference. For example, if he's considering some social theory and recalls that man is a rational animal, he will evaluate the validity of the theory accordingly. But if instead he recalls that a man is an animal possessing a thumb, his evaluation and conclusion will be quite different. Now observe the process of determining an essential characteristic, the rule of fundamentality. When a given group of existence has more than one characteristic distinguishing it from other existence, man must observe the relationships among those various characteristics and discover the one on which all the others, or the greatest number of others, depend, i.e. the fundamental characteristics without which the others would not be possible. This fundamental characteristic is the essential distinguishing characteristic of the existence involved and the proper defining characteristic of the concept. Metaphysically, a fundamental characteristic is that distinctive characteristic which makes the greatest number of others possible. Epistemologically, it is the one that explains the greatest number of others. All definitions are contextual, and a primitive definition does not contradict a more advanced one. The latter merely expands the former. Since man is not omniscient, a definition cannot be changelessly absolute, because it cannot establish the relationship of a given group of existence to everything else in the universe, including the undiscovered and unknown. And for the very same reasons, a definition is false and worthless if it is not contextually absolute, if it does not specify the known relationships among existence in terms of known essential characteristics, or if it contradicts the known by omission or evasion. An objective definition, valid for all men, is one that designates the essential distinguishing characteristics and genus of the existence subsumed under a given concept according to all the relevant knowledge available at that stage of mankind's development. The truth is the product of the recognition i.e. identification of the facts of reality. Man identifies and integrates the facts of reality by means of concepts. He retains concepts in his mind by means of definitions. He organizes concepts into propositions, and the truth or falsehood of his propositions rests not only on their relation to the facts he asserts, but also on the truth or falsehood of the definitions of the concept he uses to assert them, which rests on the truth or falsehood of his designations of essential characteristics. And that's where I'm going to stop it here. Now, all of this talk about the definitions is very, very important, because when you're dealing with the left and the lefties in your life, your parents, your children, your friends, your coworkers, they will use certain tactics and techniques of the left. And one of those tactics and techniques is called materialism. And materialism is trying to pretend that the only thing that matters is that which you can touch and feel, and that concepts do not exist or are irrelevant. So you'll hear, for instance, people say, what good is liberty if you don't have anything to eat? Okay, that's the rallying cry of the left that's being materialistic. It's crap. And the way you handle that situation is you turn it right around. Why do I care about having anything to eat if I can't be free? So that's the way you handle that situation. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the Rules for Radicals, and it's the 13 essential rules. It's been boiled down from Saul Alinsky's main book. When I come back. Thank you very much. So, and when we left off with this last time, Mr. Alinsky was talking about and using examples of we've already spelled out the 13 rules that he has, and now he's going into giving some examples of how to put these rules into action. For example, I have emphasized and re-emphasized that tactics means you do what you can with what you've got, and that power in the main has always gravitated towards those who have money and those whom people follow. The resources of the have-nots are 1. No money, and 2. Lots of people. All right, let's start from there. People can show their power by voting. What else? Well, they have physical bodies. How can they use them? Now, a melange of ideas begins to appear. Use the power of the law by making the establishment obey its own rules. Go outside the experience of the enemy. Stay inside the experience of your people. Emphasize tactics that your people will enjoy. The threat is usually more terrifying than the tactic itself. Once all these rules and principles are festering in your imagination, they grow into a synthesis. I suggested that we might buy 100 seats for one of Rochester's symphony concerts. We would select a concert in which the music was relatively quiet. The 100 blacks who would be given the tickets would first be treated to a 3-hour pre-concert dinner in the community, in which they would be fed nothing but baked beans, and lots of them. And the people would go to the symphony hall, with obvious consequences. Imagine the scene when the action began. The concert would be over before the first movement. If this be a Freudian slip, so be it. Let's examine this tactic in terms of the concepts mentioned above. First, the disturbance would be utterly outside the experience of the establishment, which was expecting the usual stuff of mass meetings, street demonstrations, confrontations, and parades. Not in their wildest fears would they expect an attack on their prized cultural jewel, their famed symphony orchestra. Second, all of the action would ridicule and make a farce of the law, for there is no law, and there probably never will be, banning natural physical functions. Here you would have a combination not only of noise, but also of odor, what you might call natural stink bombs. Regular stink bombs are illegal and cause for immediate arrest, but there would be absolutely nothing here that the police department or the ushers or any other servants of the establishment could do about it. The law would be completely paralyzed. People would recount what had happened in the symphony hall, and the reaction of the listener would be to crack up in laughter. It would make the Rochester Symphony and the establishment look utterly ridiculous. There would be no way for the authorities to cope with any future attacks of a similar character. What could they do? Demand that people not eat baked beans before coming to a concert? ban anyone from succumbing to natural urges during the concert, announce to the world that concerts must not be interrupted by farting. Such talk would destroy the future of the symphony season. Imagine the tension at the opening of any concert. Imagine the feeling of the conductor as he raised his baton. With this would come certain fallouts. On the following morning, the matrons, to whom the symphony season is one of their major social functions, would confront their husbands, both executives and junior executives, at the breakfast table and say, quote, "John, we are not going to have our symphony season ruined by those people. I don't know what they want, but whatever it is, something has got to be done, and this kind of thing has to be stopped," unquote. Lastly, we have the universal rule that while one goes outside the experience of the enemy in order to induce confusion and fear, one must not do the same with one's own people, because you do not want them to be confused and fearful. Now, let us examine this rule with reference to the symphony tactic. To start with, the tactic is within the experience of the local people. It also satisfies another rule, that the people must enjoy the tactic. Here we have an ambivalent situation. The reaction of the blacks in the ghetto, their laughter when the tactic was proposed, made it clear that the tactic, at least in fantasy, was within their experience. It connected with their hatred of Whitey. The one thing that all oppressed people want to do to their oppressors is shit on them. Here was an approximate way to do this. However, we were also aware that when they found themselves actually in the symphony hall, probably for the first time in their lives, they would find themselves seated amid a mass of whites, many of them in formal dress. The situation would be so much out of their experience that they might congeal and revert back to their previous role. The very idea of doing what they had come to do would be so embarrassing, so mortifying, that they would do almost anything to avoid carrying through the plan. But we also knew that baked beans would compel them physically to go through with the tactic regardless of how they felt. I must emphasize that tactics like this are not just cute. Any organizer knows, as a particular tactic grows out of the rules and principles of revolution, that he must always analyze the merit of the tactic and determine its strengths and weaknesses in terms of these same rules. Imagine the scene in the in the U.S. courtroom in Chicago's recent conspiracy trial, the Seven, if the defendants and counsel had anally trumpeted their contempt for Judge Hoffman and the system. What could Judge Hoffman, the bailiffs, or anyone else do? Would the judge have found them in contempt for farting? Here was a tactic for which there was no legal precedent. The press reaction would have stunk up the judge for the rest of the time. For the rest of time. Another tactic involving the bodily functions developed in Chicago during the days of the Johnson-Goldwater campaign. Commitments that were made by the authorities to the Woodlawn Ghetto Organization were not being met by the city. The political threat that had originally compelled these commitments was no longer operative. The community organization had no alternative but to support Johnson, and therefore the Democratic administration felt the political threat had evaporated. It must be remembered here that not only is pressure essential to compel the establishment to make its initial concession, but the pressure must be maintained to make the establishment deliver. The second factor seemed to be lost to the Woodlawn organization. Since the organization was blocked in the political arena, new tactics and a new arena had to be devised. So one of the first things that I wanted to say about this is, okay, great, you have this tactic, and people go to the concert and they fart it up. So what? So what? See, this is again where the left has only the strength that the right gives to it. Okay, notice that he said what he's expecting out of this is that people's wives will go, the wives will go to the husbands and say, you got to make this stop. We don't care what it's about. Make it stop. In other words, go ahead and concede to these people's demands so they quit farting in the symphony. One of the things that you can do about this, of course, is that the symphony is basically you ignore it. It cannot be said too strongly or too often that the biggest enemy of the left is apathy. It isn't counterforce. It's apathy. If you act like you just don't care, it doesn't bother you, then all the eating of baked beans and farting was for nothing. So, and again, at the end of the day, even if they change anything, what have they gained? What is it that they're gonna gain here? How is this going to make things better for blacks, for instance? It isn't, because the fact of the matter is what they're doing is they're not demonstrating power, they're demonstrating lack of power. It's still up to the people in power, the city of Rochester, because originally I want to say that this was all about the city of Rochester and back in the day, back in the 60s or whatever, and were supposedly, somebody had asked the mayor or asked the mayor about how it was race relations in the city. And he basically said everything's hunky-dory, you know. And so these protesters, these agitators, felt that he was wrong. Well, this is absolutely wrong. There's all kinds of racial problems and issues and divisions within the city. And so the whole point of this going to the concert and farting was to bring that to the attention of, to basically make the mayor, et cetera, look bad and make them realize that there's more work to be done in terms of race relations. But again, who is it that's going to have to concede? You know, because farting in a theater itself isn't going to help race relations. It's not going to make things better. It's not going to get anybody a job. It's not going to get anybody the vote. Not at all. It might even prove counterproductive. So, and the people in power, the Rochester mayor and the Rochester City Council, are the ones that are going to have to decide whether or not to accede to the demands of this group of these protesters. Those are the people that are actually in power. All the protesters are doing is acting like children. This is the kind of behavior you would expect from 7-year-olds. I can't have my way, so I'm going to fart because I know it irritates mommy and daddy. Okay, it's akin to saying, you got to give me what I want, or I'm going to sit here and hold my breath until I turn blue. Okay, and what do? You just shrug your shoulders, let them hold their breath until they pass out. And then when they wake up and they realize they haven't gotten what they want, they're going to start learning as a kid usually learns is that just because my wants or needs are thwarted at this particular time doesn't mean I'm going to suffer and die. Sorry about that. Rather popular here this morning. So, yeah, I mean, the idea is that the people that are, it's like, again, with children, they can hold their breath until they turn blue, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's up to mom and dad to make the decision as to whether or not to give them what it is that they want. And the same applies here. Every advance that the left has made has come because the right has capitulated. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. The only thing that people on the right, the only thing conservatives need to do is simply stand their ground firmly and politely. And the vast majority of times, that's going to be good enough. Look at another example is the senators that were chased out of restaurants in Washington, D.C., or otherwise hounded when they went out to eat. And what good did it do? At the end of the day, what good did it do? Nothing. Because the people in power were still the people in power. The senators had the power to decide whether or not Judge Kavanaugh was going to become a justice of the Supreme Court. Not the protesters, not the people that are being obnoxious. And you notice that basically the way that the senators dealt with it was ignoring it as much as they possibly could. If it becomes violent or whatever, then of course you have to call the police. But the point is they didn't end up getting into a fist fight with these individuals or try to shout them down. They basically, because again, the best weapon against the left is apathy. Act like you don't care, and they're farting in the wind. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from Rules for Radicals Defeated. Thank you very much. So In this book, he was started out by the author started talking about Alinsky and Obama and the connection between the two, and now he's at this section about why it matters. I do not seek to lay all of America's ills at the feet of Mr. Alinsky or President Obama, and I do not worship men as saints, and so no one man can fairly be said to embody all that is good about America. However, we must continually ask of our leaders that they guide us to higher, not lower, ground. We must insist that they seek to bring out the noblest intentions of mankind and not speak to our baser natures and encourage the very worst we have to offer. We must insist that these politicians do not feed on the desperation of the few or upon our baser instincts. This book is not intended as an intellectual defense of capitalism, nor is it intended as an intellectual rebuttal of Marxism. Instead, it is intended as a practical text. It is intended to provide for those who are busy working and have neither the time nor the desire to navigate the labyrinth of political views expressed through the ages. Instead, this book is intended as a practical guide to Americans who value their way of life and their God-given freedoms. It is intended as a guide to help you fight against a pernicious form of anti-American thought that has become far too prevalent in our system of politics. This book is intended to help you to understand who Saul Alinsky was, why his philosophy is dangerous, and how he has influenced our president. It is further intended to show you the methods that are being used to subvert our way of life and how to fight back against these methods. I hope that this book will also serve as a guidebook for candidates who are besieged by Alinsky tactics. I hope that the general principles I offer to counter the Alinsky model can be of some help for honest candidates who find themselves in the maelstrom of Alinsky attacks without the slightest idea of how to defend themselves. Once you understand who Alinsky was and what he stood for, you will begin to see how important it is that we have a way to defend against his tactics. Until recently, those who would subvert America's way of life have operated in near darkness. Too few have seen the methods that they use or the intentions they harbor. Only now are we beginning to see these decades-old methods of radical subversion come to light. Unfortunately, they have come to light only after a practitioner of these methods has won the White House. You cannot defeat an enemy you cannot see, and until now they have remained hidden. They no longer operate in secret. We are onto their ways. Now it is the job of every patriotic American to do a little studying and become educated in the ways of Alinsky. By so doing, you will see right through the facade that is being used to subvert the traditional American way of life. Your eyes will be open to the Marxist plan that is unfolding before us. The tactics they are using are those of a 1960s radical named Saul Alinsky. These tactics were used effectively during the 2008 presidential campaign. They've been used by Barack Obama as president, and they will be used in the 2012 presidential election. This time, however, you will be ready. You will see through their tactics, and you will be prepared to fight back. America cannot sustain 4 more years of Barack Obama, and it falls upon you to fight the good fight, to expose his tactics, and to arm yourself to do battle against these insidious tactics. Well, one of the problems for the author here is that he contradicts himself. In this section here says, it is intended to provide for those who are busy working and have neither the time nor the desire to navigate the labyrinth of political views expressed through the ages. Later on, he says, every patriotic American needs to do a little studying and become educated in the ways of Alinsky. And it goes on to explain why. So that's not good for his credibility. But he's right on the second part, is that everybody should do some reading. You should read some about philosophy. The book I recommend that you start with is a book by Ayn Rand called Philosophy, Who Needs It? Read that book, and that can be your starting point because, again, it answers a vital question. Philosophy has actually hurt itself, hurt its own integrity, hurt its own credibility over the years, and so it seems to be mainly a way of making cocktail party jokes rather than anything that anyone would take seriously. So start with that book, and you'll find out why philosophy is important. And then that will take you further. The other books that I would recommend after reading Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It, is the totem/icon books, and it's the introducing series. There's introducing philosophy, introducing Aristotle, introducing ethics, et cetera, et cetera. And they are in a format, it's like illustrated, heavily illustrated. So it's a lot easier to read. They're not thick, dusty tomes that you're having to slog through and deal with. And I understand that a lot of people are used to the left's idea of storytelling and verbal picture painting as a method of communication rather than dealing with concepts and abstractions. And so using the picture books that you're finding with the icon and totem books is an excellent way to kind of bridge the two, because philosophy is very heavily conceptual and abstract. But you really need to get in and find out what the different issues are. What are the issues of metaphysics? What are the issues of epistemology, ethics, etc.? And once you start getting there, then it opens your eyes as to what it is that's going on in our country and in the world around us. So at this point, that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, I thank you for listening and have a great day.